Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more.
Helen Parker was a prominent attorney in her area, seated in her office while discussing a sensitive matter with Paul Grimm, a private investigator she had relied on before. His professionalism and thorough reports had always impressed her. "This is difficult for me to ask," Helen began, her voice steady but laced with anxiety. "I need you to look into my husband. I've had several reports of him with young women, and while I hope it's harmless, I need to know for sure. Today is Friday. Can you start on Monday? You know our address, so you shouldn't have trouble catching him when he leaves." After finalizing their arrangements, Paul left. Helen sat back, contemplating Dan, her husband of 9 years. He had worked as a store manager until the auto parts store was sold to a larger chain, resulting in his dismissal. Since then, he struggled to find employment. Once devoted, she feared his loyalty might be wavering. Just after lunch, her secretary mentioned seeing Dan at the Golden Skillet with a young woman. They appeared quite affectionate, and suspicion gnawed at Helen, despite her desire to trust him. That evening, when she inquired about his day, Dan casually remarked it had been uneventful, claiming he mostly lounged around. When asked about lunch, he said he had a hamburger at a drive-in. Later, as they relaxed, Helen casually mentioned, "I met a new client today. Her husband is cheating, and she's getting a divorce. If I were her, I'd find a way to make him suffer more than that. I have no sympathy for men who betray their wives." Dan replied, "Cheating has existed forever. It's not going away." With icy resolve, she retorted, "If you ever cheat on me, I'll take everything you have. I'll punish you in ways you can't fathom. Do I need to explain?" He quickly assured her that wasn't necessary. That night, Helen lay quietly in bed, contemplating whether to call off Paul, but ultimately decided she needed confirmation. The weekend passed uneventfully, but Helen remained distant. Dan, accustomed to her moods, thought nothing of it. On Monday morning, Paul parked a distance from their driveway as Dan drove off in his red Corvette. Following him to Grandma's diner, Paul observed Dan's breakfast before tailing him to a house on Maple Street. Timing his move perfectly, he returned to his car just as Dan left. Paul felt satisfaction in capturing some revealing photographs of Dan with a brunette. After heading home, Dan left again just before noon. Paul snapped a photo of him greeting a blonde woman with a kiss, surprised when Dan brought her to his house. Paul managed to get 3 revealing shots of them in a passionate embrace. He even caught them leaving the house hand in hand, both smiling. Paul followed Dan to where he dropped off the woman, apparently returning her to work. But then, Dan shocked Paul by stopping at a house on Johnson Drive. There, Paul captured 5 incriminating images. The shades remained drawn, revealing everything. At 2 o'clock, Dan emerged. Believing he had enough evidence for Helen, Paul called her cell phone and arranged to meet directly at her office. Once there, he uploaded the images to her computer. Helen scrutinized each photo, printing 2 sets. She handed one to Paul for his records, telling him there was no need to follow Dan any further. After Paul left, Helen tried calling Dan at home, but there was no answer. When she reached him on his cell, she urged him to come to her office immediately. He promised to arrive in 5 minutes. He walked into her office to find her looking very serious. Taking a seat in front of her desk, he asked what she needed. Silence hung between them for a full 5 minutes. Finally, she inquired, "Can I see your car keys?" Handing them over, he asked, "What's this about?" "I'm taking them as partial payment for your actions," she replied. Confused, he said, "What actions?" She handed him the photos Paul had taken. "I received reports about you that I didn't want to believe, but I had to take action. I hired a private investigator to follow you, and this is what he uncovered just today. What do you have to say for yourself?" As he flipped through the images, heat rose to his face. He realized he was caught and wondered what her next move would be, divorce or something else. "I'm keeping your car, and I don't want a divorce," she declared. "So here's the deal. If you remain faithful to me for a year, I might be able to forget this. But if you stray even once, you'll regret it. I warned you on Friday, but you didn't listen. If you want to stay married, you'll agree to my terms. If, after a year, you're still the husband I married, maybe we can return to normal. I don't know if I can ever truly forgive you for what you've done. Are you willing to try and save our marriage? I promise I'll do whatever it takes to save our marriage. I'm sorry for hurting you. I'll become the husband you deserve," he replied earnestly. "You'll need to take the bus home after visiting someone named Tara Jennings. Here's the address," she instructed. As he left, he pondered who Tara Jennings might be. Upon arriving, he discovered the Behavioral Adjustment Institute at the address. Curiosity piqued, he knew he needed to go in if he wanted to avoid a divorce. Inside, he was greeted by a stunning woman in her mid-20s sitting at the front desk. "I'm Tara. I've been expecting you," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "Your wife filled me in on everything. She wants to help save your marriage. Since this place isn't very large, I have to keep my desk out here. Come on back, and I'll get you started." As she led him down the hall, he couldn't help but notice the way she moved, and thoughts of her in bed crossed his mind. She ushered him into a room with a recliner and began asking him questions. "How many girlfriends do you currently have?" she asked. "4, but there's room for more," he answered, a hint of arrogance in his tone. "Just answer the questions," she said firmly. For the next 15 minutes, she continued her inquiries, jotting down his responses. Afterward, she placed headphones over his ears and instructed him to relax and listen to the music. He reclined and closed his eyes as the sounds enveloped him. Before he realized it, Tara was back, informing him that she would see him tomorrow at 10 a.m. Confused but silent, he made his way home. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, he stopped to buy a half-dozen brightly colored panties adorned with lace and ruffles. Once home, he tucked them away in his dresser and poured himself a glass of iced tea. After his departure, Tara called Helen. "He's going to be easier than I expected. I've started him already. When you get home, check his drawer for panties. If he has any, call him Chloe, and he should adopt that persona. To bring him back to normal, call him Dangy. I've programmed Chloe to be a playful bimbo who will follow any suggestion you make. Anything you say starting with 'I suggest' will feel like an order to him. He will respond to your commands whether he's Chloe or Dan. I'll see him tomorrow to deepen the program." Helen replied, "I doubt he can change, but if your method works, I'll have more clients than you can handle. He's an incredible lover, but after sex, he acts like a dog. It doesn't matter how often he's ready, he just wants more. That part of him I don't want to change, I just want him to be faithful." After hanging up, Helen considered how far she wanted Tara to take the program. Although she hated to do this to him, she refused to let him stray with anyone else. She felt guilty for using such methods, but he hadn't heeded her warnings. When she arrived home, she checked his drawer and found the panties. A smile crept onto her face as she thought about having him wear them by the next day. A man in panties, she mused, wouldn't be inclined to drop his pants for any woman. At dinner, she turned to Dan and said, "Chloe, I suggest you wear your panties every day. What do you think?" "Oh, definitely. I have some really pretty ones. I can't wait to wear them. Can I put them on after dinner?" he replied eagerly. "Sure, but you need to wear clothes that match them." "Do you have any?" she asked. Dan replied, "No, I don't think so." "Then you should wear only those," Helen said. "I suggest you visit Mrs. Sullivan at Fashion Boutique tomorrow and let her help you choose some clothes to go with your panties." Dan agreed, and Helen beamed with satisfaction. Tara had been right. He was going to be easy to transform. She finished dinner feeling quite pleased. Afterward, she called Mrs. Sullivan at home. "Rachel, I have a big favor to ask. Dan is coming in tomorrow for some clothes, and I need you to select the most feminine dresses you have. Do you happen to have any breast forms? The bigger, the better. Mrs. Sullivan replied, we have a pair that were sent by mistake. They're huge, though, triple FS and weigh 12 pounds each. I can't imagine anyone wanting to wear something that size. They sound perfect for what I need, Helen said. He has an appointment at 10, so he'll likely arrive around 11. I think he'd look great in a blonde wig, so please plan for that. As Helen read the paper, she heard Dan come in and sit down. Lowering her paper, she looked at him, surprised to see him wearing nothing but coral-colored panties trimmed with lace. She suggested he put on some lipstick, pointing out that there was some in the bathroom drawer. He got up and left the room. When he returned, he was wearing red lipstick. Helen could hardly believe the transformation happening in such a short time. Dangy, you look lovely. Maybe you should wear lipstick all the time, she remarked. Dan blushed, confused about why he was wearing lipstick. When he realized he was only in panties, he felt a chill. I'm cold, he told Helen. Put on my robe, she suggested, knowing it would be loose on him. He soon settled down, draped in the robe. As they prepared for bed, Helen said, make sure to stop by the office before heading to see Tara tomorrow. The next day at 9:30, Dan arrived at her office. Helen greeted him warmly, noting the lipstick on his lips. After exchanging small talk for about 10 minutes, she told him it was time to walk to Tara's. Have a great time, Chloe, she said as he left, his walk swaying with a newfound confidence. When he arrived at Tara's, she was surprised to see him in lipstick. Leading him into a small room, she placed headphones on him. She was amazed at how easily he was adapting to the changes. Once she left the room, she pondered his progress. Finally, she called Helen. Has he ever cross-dressed before? He's accepting this so easily, suggesting he might have a history of cross-dressing or submissiveness. That's the only explanation I can think of for his quick adaptation. If this continues, tomorrow should wrap up the initial phase, but I'd like to monitor his progress. From now on, just saying Daniel T should trigger his memories of both Dan and Chloe. Helen thanked her for the update and, after hanging up, wondered if Dan had dressed in her absence. She quickly dismissed the thought, considering she had never found any evidence. She remembered his mother was a strict disciplinarian and might have dressed him as a girl when he was young. Dan was shocked to realize an hour had passed when Tara told him she'd see him tomorrow at 10. He left for the fashion boutique to meet Mrs. Sullivan. She was waiting for him with some outfits ready. Upon entering, he asked for Mrs. Sullivan. The sales clerk pointed her out, and he approached her. I'm Chloe, he introduced himself, and I'd love your help picking out some clothes. I'd be happy to assist you, she replied, leading him to a dressing room. Strip down to your underpants, she instructed, and he complied without hesitation. She was surprised to see his bright yellow panties, adorned with rows of lace trim. She started by attaching the enormous breast forms to his chest and then measured him for size. She entered with a black longline bra and helped him put it on. This is a 48 triple F bra. It should fit well and give you the shape you need, she explained. As she fastened it, she noticed it was snug but acceptable. Unsure if he needed a larger size, she asked, but he reassured her that it felt fine. She handed him an open-bottom girdle with garters attached. Once he had it on, she gave him a pair of black mesh stockings. She was surprised at how adept he was at putting them on and securing the garters. Next, she had him step on a shoe sizer to check his size while she gathered more outfits for him to try. Returning with a black dress featuring gauzy sleeves and lace detailing, she helped him into a black slip before sliding the dress over his head. She then added a pair of 2-inch heels and encouraged him to step out and admire himself in the mirror. Realizing she had forgotten his wig, she quickly retrieved a straight blonde wig that hung past his shoulders. Once it was on and adjusted, he looked very nice. Taking him back into the dressing room, she instructed him to remove the dress while she fetched more options. The first was a pink dress with a straight skirt adorned with embroidered blue flowers. He was pleased with how it looked on him when he saw his reflection. The next dress was blue checked with little red flowers in the white squares, featuring double ruffles at the hem and 2 more up the front. He really liked it as he admired himself in the mirror. The final dress she brought was red, designed to accentuate his figure with piping that highlighted his breasts and a miniskirt. He loved that one and was reluctant to take it off, but he needed to try on more options. By the end of the fitting, he had accumulated 10 dresses and 4 slips, along with 6 bras added to his growing pile and some sleepwear. When she mentioned he'd need matching purses, he agreed. By the time they finished, he had a large order ready for delivery that evening. Wearing the red dress and carrying a red clutch purse, he headed to Helen's office. Helen was surprised by his appearance but masked her reaction. They chatted about trivial matters, resembling 2 friends at a pajama party, until she excused herself for a few minutes. Upon her return, she said, "I just called my beauty parlor. They can take you right away. I suggest getting your makeup tattooed on, so you'll always look your best." He agreed and headed to the beauty parlor. When he arrived, the stylist asked if he really wanted the tattooed makeup. He confirmed he did. After the session, he left with pink eyeshadow, luscious red lips, perfectly shaped eyebrows with a fine arch, and bright red fingernails extending nearly an inch from his fingertips. He carried a cosmetic bag along with his purse. Back at Helen's office, he had to wait while she saw a client. The secretary asked if he wanted to help file some papers, and he agreed, quickly becoming absorbed in the task. When Helen's client finally left, he entered her office, and she was taken aback by his breasts. They were so prominent that she was amazed he didn't have to lean forward. He mentioned that he had helped the secretary with filing. When she asked how he felt about it, he replied that it wasn't bad. She told him he could continue filing until it was time to go home, which he happily did. When they got home, Helen noticed he seemed unsure about what to do, so she instructed him to prepare dinner. He jumped right in, and soon they were enjoying a delicious meal. Helen realized she had forgotten how great of a cook he was. As they ate, she asked, "What made you choose that dress to wear?" "I think it looks sexy on me. It makes me feel pretty. But most importantly, it feels so good to wear," he answered. Helen thought to herself that whether he was a man or a woman, he was undeniably oversexed. She knew he had to notice the way men were looking at him. His large breasts alone would draw attention. When he got up to fetch another glass of milk, she couldn't help but notice how his legs were enviable, thin and elegant, legs any woman would envy. After dinner, as they read the newspaper, Helen remarked that she was surprised he hadn't chosen higher heels. He admitted he hadn't thought about it and promised to look for some shoes with taller heels the next day. Helen simply smiled at his response. Then the doorbell rang, announcing the delivery of his dresses and other items. Helen instructed him to put everything in the closet of the spare bedroom. She also suggested he pack up all his men's clothes from the main bedroom closet to donate to the charity shop. He happily complied, humming to himself as he worked. That night, he came to bed wearing the most feminine baby doll pajamas Helen had ever seen. She told him he looked lovely, and he playfully minced and twirled, the fabric billowing around him. Helen thought to herself how much he enjoyed showing off. The next day, he visited a fetish shoe store and bought 3 pairs of shoes with 6-inch heels. Dressed in a black dress, he left wearing the black strappy heels. Excited to show Helen, he hurried back to her, and her face lit up with smiles. When he mentioned that his legs hurt a little, she suggested he see a doctor to find a solution for the discomfort. Helen called, and the doctor was available to see him in half an hour. He headed to the doctor's office. He explained his leg aches and expressed his desire to wear higher heels. He asked if there was anything that could be done. The doctor replied, "Yes, we can shorten your tendon, but once we do, there's no turning back. You'll have to wear those higher heels or experience significant pain. When barefoot, you'll need to walk on your tiptoes. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" "Yes, I want to wear the higher heels." "When can you do it?" he asked eagerly. She informed him she could perform the procedure in exactly 1 week. Then, she inquired if there was anything else he wanted to address. He asked for suggestions. "Well, your voice is a bit deep. We could work on your vocal cords to give you a more feminine tone. I see you're wearing breast forms. If they're what I think they are, I can remove them, trim the edges, and implant them in your chest, provided I can stretch your skin enough." He told her to proceed with the changes. She conducted a preoperative physical examination, and everything was set. He couldn't wait to share the news with Helen. That night, as they were settling into bed, Helen said, "Good night, Dangy." During the night, he had to get up to use the bathroom. Glancing in the mirror, he was slightly taken aback by his reflection and the nightgown he wore. A memory struck him. When he was 9, his mother had dressed him in his older sister's clothes as punishment. He tried to recall what he had done to deserve that now, but soon shifted his thoughts elsewhere. The following morning, he donned the red dress again. While they enjoyed breakfast, Helen asked Chloe if he would like to do some more filing for her. He agreed, and soon they were off to work. He had to take breaks to rest his legs occasionally, but he felt content. On Saturday, they went swimming in their pool. He wore a bikini that Helen thought might not fit properly, but surprisingly, it stayed in place. She marveled at his lack of resistance to the changes in his life. She expected him to inquire about his Corvette, but he never did. His submissiveness made her question whether she should have taken a different approach to punish him for his infidelities. The following week, he went in for his surgeries. The doctor entered his room and asked once more if he truly wanted to proceed with everything. He assured her he did. She promised to see him after the operations. A day later, he was awakened from anesthesia. His chest was bandaged, and his throat felt sore. Ice chips were given to him, which helped immensely. Once he was fully alert, the doctor came in. "Everything went well. The breast implant was tricky, but we managed to stretch your skin over the implants. You'll need to keep the wrapping on your chest for 10 days, then wear a shaping bra to help mold your breasts into the desired shape. You should keep the bra on for at least 5 days before transitioning to any other bra, and your breasts should retain their shape. You can start talking tomorrow, but take it easy. The soreness in your throat should subside in a few days. Your legs are also ready for recovery. We can remove the stitches before you leave, and there shouldn't be any visible scars." He was delighted to hear that everything had gone smoothly. Just as the doctor was leaving, Helen entered the room. She kissed him on the cheek and informed him that she had already picked up a shaping bra for him. He smiled gratefully upon hearing this. She then showed him a pair of pink shoes with 6-inch heels, which she said he could wear home. He was thrilled. The stiletto heels sent a rush of excitement through him. When it was time to leave the hospital, he felt ecstatic in his pink dress adorned with little birds and lace trim at all the openings. Slipping on the pink heels, he felt like the luckiest person alive. Once home, he was tired and decided to take a nap. When he woke up an hour later, Helen brought him some iced lemonade. She was pleased with his soprano voice, and he was delighted by how lovely it sounded. He spent the next week resting, quickly realizing how painful it was to walk barefoot. However, he felt it was a small price to pay for the privilege of wearing higher heels. Each evening, he prepared dinner for Helen, who appreciated how well he was managing things. He had even done some cleaning while she was at work. Finally, the day arrived for him to unwrap his chest. He carefully removed the bandages and was awestruck by his reflection in the mirror, marveling at how beautiful his breasts looked. Helen helped him into the shaping bra she had bought, a cone bra designed to maintain a conical shape when removed. Once fully dressed, he felt like he was on cloud 9 as he walked around the house. Helen called him to let him know she would take him out for dinner that night, and he was thrilled at the chance to get out of the house. By the time she arrived home, he was dressed in a black dress and ready to go. They headed to a fancy steakhouse and ordered steaks. Helen had her reasons for choosing this restaurant. "So, are you happy with everything that's happened?" she asked. He assured her that he was. Helen knew tonight would bring everything out into the open. Daniel T., I told you that if you ever cheated on me, I would punish you beyond just a divorce. He shifted his expression, and she could tell he was beginning to grasp the reality of what had occurred. She watched as his emotions shifted from anger to a look she had never seen before, leaving her uncertain about what was going through his mind. Finally, he asked, I understand you said you would punish me, but how did you orchestrate all of this? She replied, if you recall, you set the changes in motion. I sent you to the Behavioral Institute. They used subliminal messages, a mild drug, and suggestions on you. You took it from there. Now, I'm going to divorce you. You have a choice, you can move out or stay. If you choose to stay, you can be my maid and perhaps help with filing at the office some days. I'll provide you with uniforms to wear. Alternatively, you can look for a job on your own. If you need new identification, I can help you. I warned you, but you didn't listen. I know I cheated on you, and I deserve some punishment, but I never expected this. If you're going to divorce me, I can't blame you, he admitted. I realize I can be quite harsh, and maybe I went too far. If you feel that way, I'm sorry. I was so furious that I wanted to make sure no woman would consider you again. Just let me know what you decide, and I'll do my best to help you. I just couldn't have a husband who was unfaithful with every available woman in town. He responded, I already know what I want. For what it's worth, I don't mind what you did to me. As Chloe, I've had some really enjoyable experiences. I have just one request. What is it? Helen asked. Taking a bite of steak, he swallowed before replying, could you get uniforms with short skirts and call me Chloe from now on? She smiled and said, Chloe, yes. It will be wonderful to have you working for me.